Hi, Eric Bailey with the Tulsa World alongside Eli Lederman. We are the Oklahoma beat writers and getting ready for another football season. Fall camp is here, practices today. We're recording this on Friday, and the team, as we speak, is on the field. We had media days this week, so football is in the air. Eli, what do you think?
It's here, man. And like you said, they're getting their first practice in this morning. Some could consider this our first practice run. We'll see how it goes for the season because this is podcast number one of the football season. We're back from the summer. It's football time. Ready to do it.
It's funny because it just seems like the summer goes by so fast, and Oklahoma athletics really made it go by fast with their ability to win a national championship in softball, get to the championship series of the World College World Series. So it's been a good year, and 2022 starts with a lot of high expectations. There's been a lot of buildup over the past 7 or 8 months for Brent Venables and the job that he's done. And you know what interested me? We had media day. We had a 20-minute period with him on Tuesday. It's just how subdued he was. He was just always so full of energy when we saw him at, press conferences. We saw him during his barnstorming tour around the state. Everything was so excitement. But Tuesday, he was a little more subdued. And you just wonder if he's just in football mode now. Now's the time to get ready. There's a job at hand. He's ready for practice. It just seemed like a different Brent Venables.
Yeah, it did. I mean, see, part of me wondered, we would get him off the practice field, and maybe he was charged up from that, or those OU caravan events in the spring. He knew he had to be charged up, but maybe he was least excited to see us because he was the most probably subdued that we've seen him. And I think it's like they're finally here. For 8 months. We have been asking those questions of what's this program going to look like, all the kind of new coach things, and finally, and then really not talking a lot about football. There's only so much to talk about. Finally, we're at preseason camp, and I mean September 3rd with UTEP is now kind of in arm's reach. And I think you're exactly right. I think speaking with Brent Venables and then his staff, I think everybody, and maybe us included and the fans included, are ready for football because we've talked so much about everything else for the last. I mean, it's been almost a year at this point.
It's going to be interesting. Brent Venables has made this. He made this statement at Big 12 Media Days. He mentioned it again during his local media day that 40% of this team, or 40 players on this team, have never worn an Oklahoma jersey before. Is it 40% or 40 players? I can't remember. The number 40 is involved somewhere in there. But let's just say a lot of the players on this roster have not worn an Oklahoma uniform, including Dylan Gabriel. We had a chance to talk to Dylan, and the quarterback from UCF, the transfer. Everyone knows who Dylan is now. Now it's time to go out there and lead this team on the field. I was really impressed with Dylan. He's really been steady throughout fall camp. He was steady through spring football, saying all the right things. And now really looking forward to seeing how he develops over fall camp.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Dylan, kind of on that theme of like it's finally time for football, we have heard since Dylan Gabriel arrived, nothing like he's knocked it out of the park. The off season for him, showing up to a program that in a sense had just been blown up, and being that leader from the jump. We heard it all in spring camp. We've seen him this spring, the dime time retreat, taking some of his wide receivers and skill guys to one lake, his offensive lineman to another. I think Woody Washington said he's never had a quarterback take the defensive backs out to dinner. So he's checked all those boxes as the leader, but now is the time for him to do the other thing, which is the other part of his job, and that's playing quarterback at Oklahoma. And so we're going to get, our closer looks at him under center. We've really only got a few spring practices and then a spring game on a windy day. So now is the time to see if Dylan Gabriel is that experienced quarterback who we know has played with Jeff Levy, and if he can be that guy that Oklahoma needs him to be. And you can sense that excitement with him too. And you can't forget the fact that his season last year, and maybe part of the reason he's in Norman now, is it got cut short by his, as he referred to it, his first major injury, that broken collarbone. So I'm sure he's itching to get to September 3rd. And I think we're all excited to see kind of what it looks like when we get there.
It's funny when we had a chance to talk to him, and we got a chance to talk to Jeff Levy for the first time since spring. It's something that I was looking forward to. And we talked a little bit about how they brought a couple of new quarterbacks in Davis Beville from Pitt and General Booty from Tyler Junior College. And they talked about just the depth needed at that position. He also had a lot of good things to say about Nick Evers as well. But I think getting that depth at the quarterback position, getting some experienced players that have played Division I football like Beville, players that have had JUCO experience like General Booty. I think that was important. Although he did mention again, there's only one quarterback in that room that has true Division I experience.
Right.
But I think getting those players and building that room, it was very important for the team.
mean, if you think back to April, the one thing we looked at that depth chart with a ton of questions on it and said was they've got to go get a quarterback. Just simply because, I mean, as Dylan Gabriel was an example last year at UCF, it takes one play for you to go dig into your quarterback depth and different circumstances. But last year, Oklahoma had to dig into their backup depth. And so them going into this season with just Nick Evers, who seems promising, they've had nothing but good things to say about him, would have seemed dicey. And so while there's definitely questions about the experience, even of the guys they brought in, you've got two quarterbacks in General Booty and Davis Bevel that at least have experience, bring a little bit more. And I think it'll be interesting to see who separates themselves now in August. That maybe even that UTEP game is does Dylan Gabriel play all 4 quarters? Perhaps not. Who's the first guy off the bench, and what does that guy have to do this month to prove himself to be that guy?
We got a chance to talk to Eric Gray too. And, Lincoln Riley last year when Eric Gray arrived, he always talked about how professional he was and how it just really helped that running backs room. And it's funny because we're hearing the same thing from Jeff Levy, different coaching staff, different coordinators, same words. He's just a professional. And we had a chance to talk to Eric a little bit, and he is the leader of that room. And he's looking forward to playing under his 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. And it was neat. We talked a little bit also about Marcus Major. We're going to see if he's going to be available this year after last year had some academic issues, appeared late on the roster. It just seems like this style really, really will help Major with the physical run play that Coach Levy keeps talking about. And then you asked about Ventavious Thompson, the UCF transfer. Just talk a little bit about what Levy said about the incoming player from UCF.
Yeah, I mean, he's a walk-on transfer, so you don't quite know what that's going to mean and how they view him, but clearly he's from UCF. That means Jeff Levy presumably had some hand in getting him there at one point and liked what he saw then. And Dylan Gabriel worked with him. And so you'd imagine they're not bringing in a guy that they don't think can do something. And they spoke really highly of him. And I think, in some sense, and this is the case for all the summer transfers, the guys who weren't here in the spring, there's a lot of catching up to do just on what they lost, on what everyone else got during spring camp in terms of picking up this system that they've got to pick up. But I think, beyond Eric Gray, and I don't think at this point, for all the talent Marcus Major has, that we can even count him as a sure thing. It's wondering, is it Marcus Major? Is it Ventavious Thompson? Is it the 2 freshmen, Javante Barnes, who had a nice spring game, or Gavin Sawchuk, who showed up this summer? Who behind Eric Gray is can help? Because Eric Gray, he probably won't have to kind of have that Kennedy Brooks style workload. It's just a different offense with Jeff Levy. But who behind him is going to take those carries and as you said, a physical running style that's going to lend itself to them needing a deep running backs room. And again, I think that's what, things will get decided this month. And we know Eric Gray will be the guy on September 3rd, but I think in the month of September, Kent State, Nebraska, and even into Kansas State, that Big 12 opener, that's the time for guys to prove themselves and separate themselves. And maybe one of those freshmen shows that he's ready to, even if it says your 3rd running back, or Marcus Major, he's been here 4 years, but he's got 60 carries to his name. Can he prove to, can he eclipse a number like that in a single season? That's what they need to figure out. But to your point on Eric Gray, I mean, he sounded great. He says he feels great. I think he's down to 210 pounds. And I think he may be perfect with his ability to pass catch as well. He may be built to be the lead back in a Levy offense.
It's funny because, Eli, we talked about the spring about the wide receiver position, and it just wasn't a lot of depth there. And they went nuts over the offseason, bringing some transfers in, which is only going to strengthen that room. But we got to talk to 2 veteran players on this team, and Marvin Mims, who, I think he's going to be the go-to guy this year in this roster. I think everyone's no surprise. He probably will be the go-to guy at this position. And then we've got to talk to Theo Weiss, who's looking for a healthy season. I think we really haven't seen how much he can do. And it was really good to talk to Theo and get his thoughts going into this season. But when you look at what they brought in, you look at LV Bunkley Shelton from Arizona State, you look at JJ Hester from Missouri, you're bringing in some guys, some talent that you really need to help solidify those wide receiver cores. And then also Jalil Farouk, I really think he's going to be a guy who we saw play really well down in San Antonio at the Alamo Bowl that can really come in and provide a spark. And you talked a little bit about Gabriel and how he's really trying to build chemistry with his teammates. I think this is the most important chemistry building part with that wide receiver and that quarterback situation.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think maybe similar to the running backs behind Eric Gray, behind Marvin Mims, the world is all these guys' oyster. Like whoever, there's opportunities to be had there. And I think what interested me in Arlington, I kind of walked across basically 100 yards and then into the tunnel from one end of the field to the next with Dylan Gabriel, just chatting with him about basically what he needed to work on this summer because of how glowing they spoke about him in spring camp and how well he did there. I was like, so what did you need to figure out? Like, what was left to do? And for him, it was all about connecting and just getting those connections. And that explains, you know, the retreats and all of that. And that was his goal this summer. They threw a little bit out there. I think when they were in Lawton, they didn't install according to Marvin Mims. But it really has been a summer of getting closer with those guys, and we'll see maybe who he's forged the closest connections with. We know he and Marvin Mims have been fast friends. And speaking to Theo Weiss, I mean, really all these receivers, you hear that they all feel like they've gained something of a relationship with Dylan Gabriel early on, and that's clearly crucial. But I think, you know, with each wide receiver, you can look at maybe after Marvin Mims, you can look at the question marks there, and then the promise. I mean, Theo Weiss being a guy that if he's healthy, you wonder just what he could do. Jaleel Farouk, you mentioned his performance in the Alamo Bowl. And then he spoke about, you know, considering whether he even wanted to come back. And he did. He spoke about that in the spring. So there's a lot there in the receiver room that the transfers I think are really intriguing. But it again is going to be in that September window. We're probably going to find out who's for real and who's not.
You know, we had a chance, and this is, you know, we're only going to get one chance in the fall camp to talk to the assistant coaches, and it's before they even hit a practice. So one of my favorite interviews since he's been here has been Bill Beatonbow, the offensive line coach, and we had a chance to talk to him on Tuesday, and he's just really enlightening in a position group that's really hard to figure out what's going to happen there. And he gave us an idea of, you know, some of the players to keep an eye on, and you know, it's some of who you expect with the Andrew Rame at center. You got Anton Harrison. You got some of those guys that have been around, you know, Chris Murray. But it's going to be what we hear during fall camp. I just don't know what we're going to see in the opener against UTEP. So I'm kind of interested to see how this all plays out. And we're going to have to depend on Jeff Levy to give us an idea of what's going to happen at that offensive line spot. But I thought it was interesting too, Eli, when we talked to these players and we talked to Beatonbow, just how important Jerry Schmidt was for this offensive line in getting stronger and helping them be more physical. It's funny, we saw a viral video today where the whole team's giving Jerry Schmidt and throwing him on their shoulders. I mean, this guy, you probably hate him during the summer, but you love him when you see the results when you start fall camp. So, but I really think, did it sound like to you that just Schmidt's impact on this offensive line could really pay dividends?
I think so. I mean, we make a lot about the strength coaches, you know, everywhere. Though they tend to be these probably larger than life rock stars in some senses. But you know, I think Daniel Parker Jr., the transfer tight end from Missouri, he tweeted something yesterday, like, because they're calling it all body by Schmidt, and he said something like, even Schmidt's got a body by Schmidt. So they bought in with him. But you know what? I spoke with Anton Harrison, and I asked him about Schmidt because I think what's interesting is you've got a really old school coach. I mean, I'm new to the OU beat. I didn't know about the old days of Jerry Schmidt when I got here, and then he came back. And hearing about how grueling the workouts are and this, he sounds like your prototypical old school strength coach. But what I found interesting, speaking with the coaching staff, but then the players, most importantly, was the way he seemingly has a way of relating with them. Because I think a lot of that old school stuff, you'd think that might not land with a younger generation and all that, but Anton Harrison, who told me that he's now picked up weekly massages from the Schmitty workouts. That's part of his regimen now. But B, that Jerry Schmidt has found a way to push him and a lot of his teammates out of their comfort zone. And it's as much about the physical end of it and the grueling workouts and the sprints and all that as it is the mental end of either pushing yourself beyond where you think you can go, or for someone like Anton Harrison, Theo Weiss said the same thing, was pushing them to be leaders on a day where Theo Weiss or Anton Harrison might want to be a quiet guy and just go get through the workout, but not necessarily be a vocal leader. Jerry Schmidt's brought that out of a lot of them. And so I think his impact has been widely felt. But on the offensive line, I mean, a position that I think every program in the country right now can't feel certain about. It's August in college football. We know that. His impact could prove the difference maker on a at a position group that, as much as we can talk about Dylan Gabriel or the running backs or the receivers, could really make or break the offense.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about defense. We had a chance to spend about a half hour with Ted Roof, the defensive coordinator. And of course, we asked him, what was the biggest thing that he's seen out of this defense since taking over. And he says he's seen an improved football IQ. He said he sees these players smarter. They're as far as knowing assignments and things. And of course, it's still a learning process. Nothing's going to be seamless, but I think over the offseason, they had more study time. They try to grasp exactly what the coaches want from them. I thought a question that was interesting that Coach Roof was asked was, how do you compare Oklahoma's talent to Clemson's talent? And he didn't want any part of that.
No.
He said, hey, I'm just focused on what's in front of me and getting these guys better, which kind of may be telling in its own right. But it just seemed like Coach Roof, he's ready for this job at hand and appreciates this defense.
You could tell he's an experienced coach of 30 some odd years in the way he sidestepped that question. And not that it was really an important one, because he was there he's at Oklahoma and he was there to talk about Oklahoma. But I think, whatever the talent disparity, or if there even is one, are just kind of like the question marks across this defense. I think there's so many talented names. I'm looking at the depth chart right now. There's a lot of names that jump out to you, and only 11 of them can play. But the formula for them, and what Ted Roof and Brent Venables need to figure out in the next month, is which of those 11 names are the right 11 names. Because it's been a steady improvement. I think you heard Brent Venables kind of speak to the fact that he's speaking with on the linebacker specifically, but I think it was the group on the whole, that they weren't where they needed to be in the spring. And that's probably natural, particularly after the offseason OU had. But that they're getting there, that the IQ is up, and now they've got this next month to kind of take those next steps. But to you, Eric, I mean, what position group, I guess, whether it's the D-line, the linebackers, or the secondary, what element intrigued you most maybe from Tuesday, or intrigues you most going into this next month?
Well, you talk about the defensive line, and you got Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis kind of working together, working in tandem on that line. And I just impressed with, Jalen Redmond and just what how he's improved. And I want to see what he does and what he can bring to this team. We keep hearing a lot about Ethan Downs, and we saw him down in Dallas for media day. So when we look at that defensive line, we look at Redmond and we look at Downs, and there's guys that really trying to prove themselves, like Marcus Stripling, Jeffrey Johnson, one of the newcomers from Tulane. Who is he going to be able to maybe be an impact player? And I'm going to butcher this name, but from Hawaii.
I'll help you.
You say his name for me. Can you say his name?
Okay, Jonah Laulu, of course.
Laulu, yeah.
There we go. We'll get there. It's training camp. It's training camp. We'll get there.
But I think he's a guy that can also really bring some experience and talent to that defensive line. I really think Chavis and Bates, with what they've been able to do up front and kind of just teach these players different styles, I think that's exciting. I think a clean slate will be really big for a Jalen Redmond. And it's funny, we talk about this. I mean, this group right here in front of us, Jordan Kelly. I was just thinking about all these players that can make plays. And, this group, when we look at Chavis and look at Bates, they've made a lot of noise in the recruiting world too. So this is setting the foundation for what's to come, this initial group of defensive line and defensive ends.
Yeah, and then note on Jalen Redmond, I was talking to him I asked him the last time he felt like himself, like fully himself. Mostly on the field, but it kind of went into an off the field thing as well. But he said it was 2019, and that's when he led the team in sacks with 6.5. And from there, he's just been colored with injuries. And now he comes into 2022, and he says he feels as good as he's felt, but is also focused. He was talking about how having a son has really kind of changed his kind of whole outlook. And so he's a guy, I think, that is at least coming into this year feeling as good as he has in almost 3 seasons. And so that stood out to me, but it's a defensive line that certainly has kind of like a lot of this defense. There's potential everywhere. It's just who's going to jump out. I'm intrigued by Jeffrey Johnson. I really think he might be of the transfers. If you want to look at the defense and say who's the transfer newcomer who can have the most immediate impact, I would look at him.
It's funny when you mentioned linebackers with what Coach Venables said of where the linebackers are. Linebackers are always going to have a special place in Coach Venables' heart. Mm-hmm. That's when he was 28 as a defensive position coach at OU in 1999. He was in charge of the linebackers, and you can tell his fingerprints are all over what this defense does. So I think linebackers, we had a chance to talk a little bit to some of the players this week. Danny Stutzman just a sophomore. It's hard to believe here's a young man just in his second year, and he's having to absorb a new defensive style in his second season too. But I think they're expecting big things out of him. We've talked to David Ogwebu, who came back and really feels like he has something to prove. And then there's the young guys like TD Roof. We talk about the transfers from App State. Coach Roof's son and Ted Roof said that he's only number 18 in my eyes when he's on the field. So there's a lot of guys on this defense. Jaron Kinnick, the true freshman. I mean, can he make an impact as a freshman?
Yeah.
So linebackers, I think this is something that Oklahoma fans are excited to see because the tradition of linebacker at Oklahoma, it's always been a good one. And I think that they really have a good group to work with starting out in year one of the Venables era.
Yeah, I think if you go to the OU website and look at the coaching staff, it won't say linebackers coach next to Brent Venables' name. But I think alongside Ted Roof, he's a de facto linebackers coach. And you said he's got a soft spot in his heart for them. I think he also has high expectations for his linebackers naturally. I mean, I think the quote that jumped out to me said, we won't be worth a flip if our linebackers are not doing what he needs them to be doing. And they're going to ask a lot. I think this defense, again, as they put it, both Ted Roof and Brent Venables, they're going to be the quarterback of this defense. That's, I guess, the nature of the position. But you'd imagine in a Venables defense, it's especially the case. And you've got, I think I'm maybe not most intrigued, but Deshaun White is probably the guy you can pencil in today as he was the one right next to Brian Asamoah and Nick Benito last year as probably maybe the surest thing in that linebacker group, because after that, it's, David Ogwebu, who Ted Roof spoke really highly of. And then I spoke with David. He was talking about he's down, I think, 20 pounds. He just said he feels different than he has. And to your point, you said he's got something to prove. TD Roof, this is I think his third or fourth school. He's got Indiana, App State, I think Georgia Tech's in there. I think he's got four schools.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's been around and he certainly has experience there. And then, the way they talk about Jaron Kanek and Kip Lewis, they don't talk about them like they're freshmen. Jaron Kanek, it's Danny Stutzman who calls him Drago, because I think physically he does not look like an 18-year-old freshman. So again, I like September because I think it gives you a chance to see those guys, and maybe in ways we won't. Maybe Jaron Kanek plays 3 games in red shirts because he's not going to be the guy they need in October and November. But I'm hopeful that next month in some of those games we might see the depth of these positions and see what they've really got there, both for the now and the future.
One of the most exciting interviews I did and entertaining interviews I had a chance to talk to during media day was with Jay Valai, the cornerbacks coach. I mean, he was going 100 miles an hour describing everything that was going on. And, in talking about his cornerbacks, he called himself Bob Ross. He said, I need to paint a picture. I need to paint this picture right. So he made me laugh. And in the same interview, he mentioned Dave Chappelle. So I told him that's the first time I ever heard anyone mention Bob Ross and Dave Chappelle in the same answer. So I really was impressed with him. But when we look at his defensive backs, we look at his cornerbacks and what he has in front of him. And, we talked a little bit about CJ Colton, the Wyoming transfer who came during the summer, didn't come during spring. We asked about him. Key Lawrence, you're going to get what you expect with him. He's going to try to build off. And again, like we talked about Eric Gray learning his third system in 3 years, that's Key Lawrence, the Tennessee transfer. He's going to have to do the same thing. I think the most intriguing player for me on defense in the secondary is the same person it was during spring ball. It's Billy Bowman. And the sophomore, he is just playing safety. He was bouncing around so much last year. And we wrote about him during the spring about how he was just going to settle on one position and he's sticking to safety, which I really think with his athleticism, he can really make some things happen in the backfield, defensive backfield. So, but just your thoughts, Eli, on the secondary and what they have in front of them, and CJ Colton. I know we asked about him too. Just what did you glean from the coaches on Tuesday?
Well, starting with Billy Bowman, clearly he's immensely talented. He wouldn't have been on the field in the spots he was in last year if he wasn't. But as I think the new coaching staff has said, and as he himself told us Tuesday, playing, he was equipped to do it and he'd be equipped to do it again, I think. But playing all those different positions was a lot. And so for him to be settled in one place seems to me to be the best way to maximize whatever skill he's got. And I asked Justin Broyles about him. And a fun fact, I asked, Billy Bowman is reputedly one of the most competitive guys on the team. So I asked him who's the second most, and he said Justin Broyles. And they debated who's the better Madden player. According to Justin Broyles, it's him. But Justin Burrows also said that the player that came back in the spring and now this summer in Billy Bowman is just so much more comfortable and mature and all those things that you'd expect, that a freshman might not have, especially the situations Billy Bowman got thrown into, that he's now just settled. And I think that's got to be, if you're looking at that secondary and who could be a difference maker and maybe elevate that secondary, it'd be him in that position. But then you brought up CJ Colden. And I think we can slate Woody Washington in at one of those corner spots. And then the other, DJ Graham and CJ Colden, you've got a guy who we talked to Woody Washington about this in Arlington, DJ Graham shedding just being the guy who made the catch, and asserting himself and being ready to be that guy. And then CJ Colden is this experienced corner from Wyoming who's, Jay Valai said, he's big, long, fast, and experienced, but has catching up to do because he wasn't here in the spring. So that on a roster where, for as many questions as we have, I don't know that there's a ton of position battles. There's not maybe one that we're looking at, but I think that's an interesting one. And then after that, you got Trey Morrison as the North Carolina transfer. Look, yesterday, he's played 49 career games. So for all the experience this team lost, they've also got guys like him. McCade Matoyer on the offensive line has played a lot. Jeffrey Johnson's played a lot. So they brought in their transfers, you can tell that a priority certainly was experience. And they've got plenty of it now in that secondary.
One transfer who made an impact last year and will make an impact this year as well as Michael Turk. Here's a guy, and we look at all the interviews that everyone did on Tuesday, and Michael Turk probably had the most people with the longest group. I mean, he went 32 minutes. He went above and beyond what a lot of the players do. He's just entertaining. He can really hold court. And I think when we look at special teams, you look at Michael Turk and you know what you're going to get with Michael Turk, the Arizona State transfer. But then, I had a chance to talk to Michael and I asked him, why'd you come back? Because he could have went to the league last year. He had a great season kicking the ball. And he told me that he just felt like there was unfinished business, and he really likes the atmosphere and the culture at OU, as well as Brent Venables. I think he was really high on Venables hiring, and he's a guy who just feels like he still has things to prove. And I think Oklahoma's going to benefit from his ability to flip fields and just really have a veteran guy in that room. And it's not just on the field, but it's off the field, because as the veteran with those special teams group, he really, really has command of that room, and people look up to him. All the young kickers and punters, they look up to him. He's going to hold this year. He told me that he's going to be the holder. Oklahoma needed a new holder. He's done it before, and he's going to do it again this year. So I think that's a key. And I think, going into fall camp, it's going to be interesting to see who's going to emerge as the kicker too. Gabe Burkich was really automatic at that spot over the last couple of years. And now you're going to find someone else and try to really audition at a position that you kind of don't think about much, but it's probably one of the most important positions, not only kicking field goals, but kicking the ball during kickoffs, kicking them into the end zone.
Yeah, well, you're right that it's not one you don't think about much, because we talked about it before we hopped on here. No one asked Brent Venables, and of the assistants who was not made available, there was no special teams assistant out there on Tuesday to talk about replacing Gabe Burkich. And maybe part of the reason that you didn't think about it for a while is because Gabe Burkich, by and large, was pretty reliable at the kicking spot. And now Oklahoma's got something to fill there. There's not much to say about it yet, but you've got Zach Schmidt, who's an OKC guy. You've got Gavin Marshall. And that's something maybe even for Monday to ask Brent Venables about, because we know just how important the kicking game is. Not important until it is, until it becomes a problem. And so that'll be a development this next month.
I think we covered a lot of the football. It's just one of those times where it's just going to be a grind. Oklahoma fans are going to have to wait a month until we get the first game. It'll be here before we know it, but this August is always a grind. Anything else? Other sports? I know men's basketball. They came out with a big.
Hey, they're jet setting. Well, I don't know how big. I'll say this as far as the competition for OU men's basketball. In Europe, they're on their foreign tour. Even Porter Moser said he's done these tours for years, but he did one as a player at Creighton. He would do them at Loyola. He said you never really know who you're going to play until you show up. But they won by something like 45 points yesterday in Spain. But I'm just jealous of their itinerary. They're at the Sagrada Familia this morning. They did the Olympic Village in Barcelona. They're headed to France. So the men's hoops team and the women, they're all traveling well right now in Europe. And I guess just one other note would be that, earlier this week, OU came out, OU Athletics announced $109 million in fundraising during the fiscal year of 2021-22, and that's a new record And it makes sense when you see all the projects they've got popping up. They've got Love's Field, they've got stuff they want to do to the baseball stadium, all the way down to gymnastics. We know football is never done building. And so I believe that 109 million was part of a record 317 for the university. So there you go. And that was the big news, I guess, out of OU athletics and the department this week.
It's really a credit to the job that Patty Gasso and Skip Johnson has done with their respective programs. I mean, you look at, they've earned a lot of that just with the success they had. And, baseball with Skip Johnson, it was incredible, the Omaha trip and what they were able to do there. You just think about how close they were to winning a national championship. And, going into the season, did you think that? And the Major League Baseball draft proved that they had players on their team when Johnson lost his entire starting rotation. But that can be a good thing too, because that means pitchers, if you're a pitcher and you want to, pitch for the best, Skip Johnson has the track record and he'll get you to the league. So I was impressed with that. And Patty Gasso, they just keep getting recruits and transfers. And I mean, they're just stockpiling talent over there. It's almost unfair. The two-time defending national champions. I had a chance to talk to her. We hadn't really talked over the summer. I had a chance to talk to her in Omaha, and I said, "When did you start thinking about the next season?" It was the day after they won the championship. She said, "Yeah, we celebrated that night, but then it never ends." So I think both of those programs, the success they had over the summer, really aided in that donations and then in those donations. Excuse me.
Yeah, and something tells me, Eric, based on the off seasons both Skip Johnson and Patty Gasso are having, we might be staring at another busy June. I don't think we're gonna. Don't start planning vacations for June next year, because I think we'll be certainly in OKC, and we might be following another Oklahoma baseball team that's making a nice run for themselves.
Exactly. Well, Eli and I will be doing podcasts throughout the fall, throughout fall camp. So be sure to keep an eye on us. TulsaWorld.com. That's where our written content can be read, as well as our online content. Everything that goes online goes in the paper too. So keep an eye on us. Download the podcast. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you find out your podcast. So we appreciate your time today. And for Eli, this is Eric, and everyone out there, have a good weekend, and we'll talk again soon.